We are honored by the presence of our Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, here tonight. First, I also want to congratulate you and your government with Norway's membership in the UN Security Council 2021-22. As you will remember, from last time Norway was member, when we were together in government. This is a great challenge, but also represent great opportunities. And one of them is to focus on the problem we discussed today, hate and discrimination. I invite you, Prime Minister, to come forward to deliver your speech.
Good evening, everyone. I am very pleased to be here today. This conference will focus on what we can do to fight hate and discrimination. As mentioned here, yesterday Norway was elected into the Security Council of the United Nations. And we will make use of our seat to promote peace, security and human rights. And the fight against hate and discrimination is part of this effort. Discrimination is not just a matter of human rights. It involves peace and security as well. Society with a high level of discrimination are often unstable. Exclusion can cause unrest to spread. Sadly, hate and discrimination are still very topical issues. People all over the world have these last weeks been protesting following the arrest and death of George Floyd in the US. The video footage shows unnecessary brutality with a tragic outcome. A police officer involved in the incident has now been charged with murder. But it is an example of brutality that we see in not just the US, but also other countries in meeting with people who might be looked upon as a challenge in their society, but it's also due to racism and discrimination. And of course, it's not the first time African Americans have protested about police behavior. No, the whole world are rising up against the discrimination. And many people have protested here in Norway too. I fully understand their action. But of course, as Prime Minister, I cannot break the infection control rules. It's an important issue also to combat the COVID-19 disease. Today, the United States is a divided country, divided politically, divided inside their society. That's not a good start for a country to grow on. In Norway, on the other hand, there's a high level of social equality and trust, and people generally feel safe. But even in Norway, many people must cope with racism and discrimination. This undermines trust and leads to greater inequality. That's why we have to be concerned about issues like racism and discrimination, because it does also break down the very fabric of the Norwegian society if it is increasing in our society. But there are some good statistics. Norway's integration barometer for 2020 was presented last week. This survey on immigration, integration and diversity shows that more than 8 in 10 people believe there is some or a lot of discrimination in Norway, and this is the highest level ever recorded. More than 8 in 10 Norwegians also believes that immigrants facing discrimination when applying for jobs, and 4 in 10 believes the same is the case when immigrants are in contact with the police. But if you look at the surveys on how immigrants or the children of people who have immigrated to Norway is trusting the police in Norway, they trust the police more than the average Norwegian does, which is, I think, is a proof of this fabric that we have and the trust that is important to keep in our society. And of course, the increased statistics might not be a sign that discrimination has increased. It could mean that more people have become aware of the problem, including people who have never experienced it themselves. And it could be a good thing, because if you're more aware, you also raise your voice more if you see it, if you experience it, and you know it shouldn't be there. And what we really see now is that the feeling of young people for a just society is among those that leads the protest also against racism and discrimination in the demonstrations in Norway. Because we have to recognize a problem before we can start to do something about it. In the last few weeks, many people have been sharing their personal meetings with racism. But I've been into government before under the leadership of former Prime Minister Bondevik as the Minister of Immigration and Integration. And I have to admit, I have heard these stories for the past 20 years of young people having problems getting a job or feeling that they get a job that is not up to the qualifications and the degrees they have, and that they are talked to in a way by other Norwegians that makes them feel as a secondary citizens in our society. And all of these meetings have shown me that racism and discrimination comes in many forms. They may appear at work, at school, or on the football pitch. When you are on the bus, when you're in the bar, or when you're looking for a place to live. On social media or on the street. Everyday racism can grin people down slowly. Racism and discrimination are threats to the democracy that stops people from using their talents to benefit society. What racism and discrimination share is not seeing people for who they are, but judging and labeling them out of fear and ignorance. And the drip, drip, drip effect drives people apart. The small always nagging on the fact that your parents came from another country, you look different, is always making this gap wider. So we must fight against the drips as well as the more serious acts of racism. They threaten to undo the ties that bind our society together. This is why the government has prepared an action plan against racism and other forms of discrimination. This is an overall plan that addresses how racism and discrimination affects different groups in different ways. It will be used to renew and strengthen Norway's efforts to combat racism and discrimination. It includes steps to expand research and build up expertise, action targeting children and young people, dialogue meetings at local and national level, and campaigns against discrimination in bars and restaurants. Knowledge and dialogue are vital in the fight against hate and discrimination. And the funny thing about this drip is that people might not think that, my action is based on racism or discrimination. It might just be that the barkeeper says, okay, they don't drink alcohol, I don't earn money. So why should I let them in? Or the person who asks you questions on your origin and feeling that you're a secondary citizen, when you're done, don't understand that when you have answered that question so many times and you are born and bred up in Norway, but you look different, it is a way of feeling secondary in our society. But also all of those who get a job application and for practical reasons don't really think so much about how their prepositioned thinking might lead to them finding a way through that big hole, stack of applicants and ending up with people who are looking the same, with the same education, and maybe more male than female, more Norwegian looking with Norwegian names than others. All of these things that might be one in a case for those who are making the decisions and not understanding that the systematicness of that leads to the feeling of not being able to use your talent in your society. It means that we have to be aware of our action in all different types of position. Having a job is the key to inclusion and integration. Of course, some people are not invited to interviews just because of their names. The action plan also includes a pilot project that we are now having in the government to submit an anonymous job application to the government administration. Research show that people with foreign-sounding names have a 25% lower chance of being called into a job interview, and the pilot project will look at whether more immigrants or children of immigrants to Norway are invited to interviews and offered jobs in the government administration if their names are not on their applications. We are working along several other tracks as well. We are updating our action plan against anti-Semitism. We have also begun the work on an action plan against discrimination and hate targeting Muslims. The Ministry of Culture has held meetings in various parts of the country, obtaining inputs to the new plan. And yesterday we presented our revised action plan against radicalization and violent extremism, because this is closely linked to our work on discrimination. No one is born a terrorist, but people may turn into terrorism if they believe that they have no other options. If their group belongings is fulfilled in somebody with an extreme purpose instead of feeling connected to our society. This is why prevention is vital. We must identify people who are in the risk of as soon as possible and take effective steps to help them. This is how we can make people less vulnerable to radicalization, and this is how we can build a more inclusive society. And this is the same if the radicalizing ideology is extreme jihadism or if it's neo-Nazi youth groups that are targeting. It's a lot of the same type of mechanisms that is functioning. The Norwegian Police University College has been working to increase the numbers of students with minority background, and they are succeeding. All police districts are to appoint diversity liaison officers. They will work with the ethnic minority groups to prevent conflict and the loss of public trust, as we have seen in other countries. And happily, as I said earlier on, in Norway, more than 7 out of 10 people trust the police, and the percentage for immigrants are even higher than that for the population as a whole. And we want Norway to be a society based on freedom and justice, a society where everyone has equal opportunities, whatever their background or heritage. But freedom of expression is one of our most important tools for encouraging dialogue. And the government has recently appointed the Freedom of Expression Commission. Its first meeting was held last week. Article 100 of the Norwegian Constitution is on freedom of expression. It was amended in 2004, the year Facebook was launched. Since then, society has changed in many ways. Perhaps most of all in the venues for abusing your freedom of expression and the challenges the new social media poses to that. My government and I personally are expecting a lot from the Commission's discussions and conclusions on how we managed to keep our inclusive society and still have freedom of expression as the backbone of everything we do. The Commission has been asked to promote a broad public debate, include input and viewpoints from many different groups. Dialogue is not always the easiest part to choose. Sometimes it might be the most difficult one, but it's always the right path to take. Speaking up means taking a stand. It means speaking out for the values that you believe in and the society you would like to live in. And we do not want a society where the color of the skin, the place you come from, or the place your parents came from determines who you are, where your sexual orientation or your religion defines you as a person. And racism and discrimination destroys our trust in each other. That is why we have to work together towards our common goal, a society where you can be yourself, a society where our actions are based on dialogue and understanding. Thank you.